Hello and welcome to the Story Engine podcast. Today on the show, we have Dr. Kevin Mays, and we are going to be talking about the magic of leading yourself first. We're going to break down some of the interesting things that happen in our childhood, from being an only child, the youngest child, or the oldest child, and how that shapes our worldview and perspective, and ends up making a lot bigger of an impact in our lives as leaders than we might expect. Kevin's going to show us how to break those patterns and start leading ourselves, which trickles down into our teams, our clients, and attracts people that are much more aligned with our gifts and our power. And we'll be crafting a story just for him to express that power for his upcoming book launch. So without any further ado, let's hand it over to Dr. Kevin Mays. Dr. Kevin Mays, welcome to the Story Engine podcast.
Thank you so much. I am excited to be here. So thank you for the time.
Absolutely. So to start things off, we've got a lot of great things to talk about, and I'm excited to dive into your brilliance. But to set the stage right, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you're showing up in the world today?
The way I love it. So I am Kevin Mays, Dr. Kevin Mays, hard fought. After I was kicked out of college, I discovered my true passion in learning when I realized I don't have to do what I should. I get to do what I want. And that shifted everything in my cognitive framework and how I showed up in the world, and put me in a position where a pathway to begin to live life on my terms back in the day. And I just studied and traveled and really stretched out my 20s for 20 years until now. The way I show up is I get to take my experience in history and background, whether it's as a psychologist or a self-awareness junkie, having spent a lot of time in meditation environments and studying leadership and working with leaders. And that's how so much of that I bring to the table, which is helping busy leaders and high achievers become inspired executives, and to learn how to understand the formula for leading themselves first to become exceptional, to become excellent, and to understand what that pathway is. So for me, and it's not an external path, right? It means I have to continually walk on my path, which requires a lot of inward focus a lot of the time, and understanding what makes humans tick, what makes me tick, what makes us all tick, and how do we get better. So the way I show up now, whether it's speaking, consulting, coaching, or as a family man with 2 kids and a beautiful wife, it's just trying to create life with purpose and intention.
I love that. I love the turnaround of doing what you want instead of what you should. And I think a lot of us operate from a what we should do or what we think we should be doing kind of mindset. And something you said that's interesting, I'm curious about. You said you got to live your 20s for 20 years. And it sounds like there was something specific that happened that got you out of your 20s, which is maybe an upgrade in identity or some kind of important moment. What was it that shifted you out of your 20s and into your
Well,
next
it was
stage?
interesting, and it kind of, I think for me, it winds back to when I was younger, doing what I should, studying engineering, because I wanted to, I grew up in Michigan. Any job worth its salt, you're an engineer. So that's the work I did. But it wasn't really the work. It was the should, not what I could. And along the way, then I decided, what if I studied aeronautical engineering and flew airplanes? So it was beautiful. That would allow me to travel, and that seeing the world was my real passion. Well, I'm 19 years old, 18 maybe, I can't remember exactly, but flying airplanes. And I remember being completely bored. So I would get them in these inverted stalls and spins and do these things you're just not supposed to, because I have a low risk aversion. And I remember coming out of the spin upside down, and I had to pull all the way through the arc, and I'm in the never exceed speed in this little Cessna, in the gravitational force is pulling the blood out of my head, and the horn's going off, and I'm yanking the wheel back, just skating just above the trees. And I remember that one bead of sweat dropping down my temple, and I thought, I had this aha moment. Kevin, this is not the career path for you. So I landed, I sold my car, bought a motorcycle, and with $50 in my pocket, took off across the country and proceeded to do that over and over and over, every state. And I would just go back to school thinking someday I'll grow up. I don't need to now. Let me just stay in school until eventually I feel like I have some sense of what I wanted to do. And it took a while, but then within all at once, I was 21 years old. I graduated, got married, got a job, got a house, got a dog, bought a car, and my age doubled overnight. And suddenly I'm a 42-year-old guy, like, oh, I got to freaking grow up now. I had to adultify. And it was amazing. Then in my first job, was a consultant, my first like professional job, right? I mean, I'd been actually, that's not true. I'd been a psychologist for a while, for a decade. But now in the leadership space, I was working for a consulting firm owned by a bank. So suddenly I'm buttoned up. I went from this renegade riding a bike and living out of a tent to had to figure out how to wear a suit and a tie and try to act like I belonged in a very constrained banking environment. The beautiful thing is, though, as a wholly owned subsidiary of this consulting firm I was part of, we took the bank through the recession in 2006, 7, and 8 to go from a mid-sized regional bank to the ninth largest bank in the country. Other banks are folding, and this bank was doing it right. And I remember the bank executive telling me, it's not dumb luck. It's because we're teaching this conscious leadership. It makes a difference. And that was the work of my heart and soul. That's what I wrote my dissertation on. That's what I was helping the bank learn. They came through smelling like roses. So it was fantastic. The hard thing is, as a risk-loving entrepreneurial type, being in a bank environment, it was like a square peg in a round hole. And after a while, I realized it was time to do something else. And I remember this process very clearly because it was an absolute leap. No different than the first time I drove my motorcycle out to California and ran out of money and didn't know anybody for 2,000 miles. And my motorcycle broke down and I had nothing. Broke down and at the end of the road. And I learned, I don't have to rely on, that's the real thing, the moment that tore away this veneer of what I should do and who I thought I was, and all those ideas and the identity I'd created got ripped away, and suddenly I was just barren in the moment, and it was all up to me. And it was amazing revelation. It was a state of destitution, and then, but married to revelation and this wide open awakeness that happened within me. So now I am moving to Michigan and literally quit my job, packed the truck. My wife stayed home with 2 kids. She had 2 kids. I came up to Michigan and started this business. Just taking a leap. And I've learned that it's with my thoughts I create the world. And then I realized that's not my learning. That's the original teaching of the Buddha 2,500 years ago. There's nothing new under the sun. But I became completely committed to mastering consciousness and to helping executives learn how to do that and have that executive presence and awareness and attention, conviction, and vision that changes the game. So a lot of pieces came together to catapult me into the place where I am today.
It resonates a lot with me. I built a lot of my skill set and my business to do similar things. I've been able to live in 5 or 6 countries in South America. I learned to speak Spanish and Portuguese. I lived in Southeast Asia for about a year and have basically lived where I've wanted in the world. I lived on the big island of Hawaii during the pandemic. And I've been feeling this as well. I'm 37 now, and I am feeling like I've gotten to live my life on my terms in many ways, and things are coming together in this next chapter and opening up something different. So I appreciate this, and I may be in just the right spot for the things you're talking about. I'm curious, you're talking about working with conscious leaders or helping leaders become more conscious and leading themselves. And just by what your book implies, lead yourself first. It sounds like the person that it's for, they are not leading themselves, or something else is leading them, which may be the shoulds of the world or some others' expectations. I'm curious, if I'm not leading myself, or your ideal people, your ideal readers aren't leading themselves, what is leading them? And what problems is this causing for them?
Yeah, fantastic question. It's this invisible force that leads all of us. You think about when you came into the world, right? You had hardware and you had software. And your hardware is your brain and your software is your mind, but your mind isn't really formed. You don't have patterns. You don't have a self-concept. By the time you're age 3, your brain is forming 1 million neural connections a minute, meaning that you're absorbing all this information from your external world and learning how to relate to it, and forming your self-identity, forming all these patterns of belief and self-concept in your thinking mind, which is held in the neural wire of your brain. So in those first years, you're actually forming the neural connections in your brain that form the foundation for your worldview and your self-concept. Now, all these ingrained patterns, I think of them as, over time, it goes from a pathway to a 2-track, to a dirt road, to a paved road, to an 8-lane superhighway. And now here we are moving through the world with these 8-lane superhighways that we don't even see or know. It's like the lens we see the world through, but we don't see the lens. We see the world through the lens. And so there are these patterns that drive how we think, and that thinking drives how we feel, and the feeling drives how we behave. And so really what it boils down to in my mind is there's like 3 brains. There's a robot brain, which is that consistent pattern that we've developed. And for me, nothing makes it more clear than just thinking about your birth order. Birth order, sibling position demonstrates so clearly how we formed these patterns. 22 out of the first 23 astronauts into space were oldest children in their family. How does that happen? There's something that you pick up based on that family system that gets ingrained early on, that drives you. And most people, I'm going to say 99.9% of the population, keep making the same decisions, thinking they're exercising free will. Because the hard thing is, it's the comfort zone. We get validation for that thing. It puts a swing in our step when we get validation from the external world that affirms all of these patterns that we've developed. And again, nothing is more dear than the pattern, the belief about myself. So I have this belief, Kevin's this smart, important, hardworking one. And when I get validation and belief for demonstrating that, it feels good, so I do more of that thing. But now you're a founder of a company that has grown, and you learn to be the hard worker, take it on yourself, be the first one in, the last one out. Everything's driven with urgency. You'll learn to be the family hero early on, and now you're showing up as an entrepreneur, trying to get your business from 25 million to 50 million, and the biggest roadblock to the whole system is you, and you don't see it. So for me, it's all about learning how to upgrade your leadership, which is nothing more than upgrading the neural wiring in your brain to change how you think, because when you change how you think, it actually changes how your brain is formed. And over time, then it creates a new level set, a new pattern, a new identity. And there's a real choice point that happens with awareness, that some people live their lives in those 8-lane highways, get more and more deeply ingrained over the course of their lifetime. And then you see it becomes a constraint, right? And that's it. We learn to be constrained because we come into the world wild, feral individuals, humans, and we learn use your inside voice. Don't throw that in the house. Don't put snow down your sister's coat. Whatever, all the things I heard. So we learn to be, if I do this thing, I'm okay. And to step out of that means I'm not okay and it doesn't feel good. So we just get that it's like this thing that suffocates us over time. And you've seen the cantankerous old SOB who is constrained by their worldview. And for me, the real work is learning how to have a deep enough sense of presence that you can see that, be aware of that pattern, and put it down. And step into the fire a little bit, to not know, to not have the answer, to not be the one who's right, to not be the smartest one, to not be the one who always has to be the pleaser, or whatever your story is, right? We all have these success drivers, the scripts, to put those down and to really step into our discomfort. That's where the growth happens. And that's where I see executives become exceptional. You wouldn't know it's even possible when you look at the world today and you see people who are so ingrained in being right and having the answer, and it's their way or the highway. It becomes very divisive. And when your cup is full, you can't put any more in it. So a lot of the work is learning how to just be okay in the moment.
I see this problem every single day with the people that I work with. And this same problem impacts how you strategize your speeches and what you talk about, because of we have to get our wires crossed to be in the entrepreneur world. And one of the things that happens, we get rewarded for our hard work and our grinding hard. We learn that what we do is valuable. And then there is a certain level, and it seems like you understand exactly this threshold where it happens, where your own ability to solve your problems with your two hands, which was so useful and so good at getting you off the ground, now is the chief limiting factor in your ability. And then you try to sit down and you want to write a talk to scale yourself. And you think, what stories should I tell? And because of the formed pattern of what I do is valuable, it implies who I am is not valuable. And so the stories that actually people would want to listen to, would want to hear, would want to connect with, are very often filtered out, and we can't even access them. And what we would teach, or why we teach in a way that tries to please ourselves and impress ourselves or prove ourselves to our audience, instead of what is actually useful to the audience right now, which means people, and I'm sure you've seen this all the time as a speaker, somebody who speaks they go 20 minutes over time before they get to any kind of call to action or anything. They drive the event planners crazy. The audience is confused, even though they feel like they're doing their very best stuff. And then there's no stories, because the idea of sharing a story about who you are, especially one that's vulnerable, is either so scary or manipulative, which is just really a way to kind of say sour grapes that it's scary. But yeah, I see this a lot. And I imagine that this means, like, for an executive and a leader, their teams are always coming to them with fires to put out. That means they're probably working 14 plus hour days, exhausted, not taking care of themselves. If they have a family life is strained, health problems. What other things are like occurring at the edge of this threshold for you?
Well, the interesting thing is too, and this is why I love working with the leaders in these systems, because the system begins to reflect the way they show up. And so what I'll see, if I look at the front line of the organization and I see confusion and chaos, I see lack of communication, I see systems are broken, I see customer delivery doesn't happen on time, and there's a lot of errors, 100% of the time, I can trace it back up. So what it'll appear to be from the executive is this external thing. They don't recognize that at the top of the pyramid where they sit, everything becomes an expression of their mind. And they don't recognize that if they change themselves, they're going to see the whole system change. So they're running around scrambling, like you said, putting out fires, trying to create accountability for other people, doing it themselves and being exasperated. That, as one leader said to me, Kevin, I work with a bunch of idiots. That's what he said. Kevin, I work with a bunch of idiots. And I asked him, this is the CEO talking about his executive team. I said, why'd you hire a bunch of idiots? He said, they weren't idiots when I hired them. What's the consistent factor here? Might be less about them and more about you. And when you think they're idiots, how do you show up differently with them? How do they react to you? How do they then turn that and face it downward? And you're creating a whole system of idiots, and it's not about them, it's about you. However, looking at yourself is hard, because ignorance is blissful, and it's not me, it's everybody else is an idiot. And that's the hard thing. How do you learn? We learn to be masters of the external world and not really to turn our attention back in, to notice ourselves. And it is, like you say, it's that vulnerability underneath everything. That's the point of human connection. That's what makes organizations great. But how do you do that, right? I love, as you're talking about it, even I can fall into, when I'm talking to groups, myself making myself look grand in my stories. And I'm pretty good too at being as the youngest child in my family. I don't mind getting a laugh off my own failures. Yeah, what's that?
It's a useful, being a victim is a very useful tool as the youngest child. But there's one, we'll have to just out myself, since you've been outing yourself, because I'm worse than a youngest child.
Are you
I'm
the
only child?
Oh, no.
The worst. So what does that mean? Tell me how I messed
what I
up.
see with only, again, I trace it all the way back, and the threads of how you are today have there's one end that comes out in this present, But if you trace it all the way back, you grew up and your siblings were your parents. So are the people around you. You're probably overly adult. You learn to be on and have more sophisticated perception and conversation because you weren't doing it with kids. I think about it. Oldest child is having those conversations with younger kids. Your peers were your parents. So you learn to over adultify. You learn to always be on. What I find for a lot of leaders who are oldest is sometimes they're good at being independent to a fault. They're good at not needing help. They're good at being completely self-sufficient in ways that they don't delegate. They don't ask for help. They take too much on themselves. And then they have this ultra high bar that they end up just kind of getting exasperated at everybody else's incompetence. Because, and I go all the way back, when they were young, they weren't kids. They were little mini adults. That's how they learned how to communicate.
Yeah. Some of the things that I've noticed reflecting on myself is I avoid conflict because if I had a sibling to fight with and strife against, then I could practice conflict, but it was just me versus my parents. And they're like, this is the way it is.
Yeah. Right.
And so that's been a big one. And also in that same way, I think in a strategy to avoid conflict, I overtake on responsibility. I will, instead of like trying to fight for a perspective or engage in uncertainty, I will just take on the whole problem myself, which is it's like not super helpful anymore.
Well, the thing I love about that is when you learned it, it not only allowed you to survive, it allowed you to thrive in that pattern, right? So you didn't have it when you came into the world, but that's what you created. And now your brain supports it. And now here you are decades later. And if you're not paying attention, it'll undermine you.
Oh, as it has, which is how it's turning me out of my 20s.
Yes, I love it. I love it. I love it. It's like that wake up to recognize what got you here is great. But it might not be the thing. If you really want to be honest with yourself, it might not be the thing to get you where you want to go in the next 20 or 30 years.
I get it.
And how do you change that?
So speaking of where we want to go, we've explored some of the problem areas, and there are some things that make how you get people to where they're going better, easier, faster. I think leading by what you want makes the rest of your life easier and in line. It's choosing your life instead of being pulled by fate. And it trickles down into your team. Is there anything else about this lead yourself first process? Not the results that you get, but how you get us there that's unique or different that you would like to highlight?
It's interesting. It's all the multiple steps of this conscious leadership process. While they're all tied together, it's all one thing, but different steps. And it's not, I've seen great individuals who are very popular, nationally for their leadership development, and it's always a new thing. Like, no, in my mind, the truth of the matter is either there's truth or there's not truth. And it's not, if you believe there is some sort of underlying truth to reality, it's not dressed up in one perspective's pretty bows. It's not a dogma. It's not a belief system or structure. In fact, as soon as you write it down, it becomes obsolete because the nature of the reality is dynamic. So learning how to and have a skill set to turn your awareness in, to become aware of your patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving, and to make that a mental muscle and a discipline, I think for me is the work. Because then once you do that, you're in a position to interrupt the old pattern, replace it with a new one in a way that's aligned with not only who you want to be, but it must be anchored to some deeper level of, some deeper truth, which is ethical, moral, right? With your thoughts, you create the world. And if it's all about me, you're going to live in isolation.
It's going to be boring too.
Open and generous, you're going to live in abundance if you're looking out for others. And it's all because it becomes a reflection of our own mind.
Perfect. I want to hear about a moment in your life, specifically in time and space, maybe you were leading teams like your people do, and they were all a bunch of idiots in the same way, or you were working a bunch and exhausting yourself. Maybe you were experiencing limitations in your family and your health. You did a good job at having a family. I'm certain they were great teachers for you in this process. But when was the pattern so strong and so painful that you knew you had to change something, just like what you're talking about in your book?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. Part of it is, for me, it's like knowing how to keep my seat even during my own angst and during my own, whether it's anxiety, depression, malaise. And we get a lot of that after 6 weeks of cloudy skies here in Michigan. It's easy to fall into that. But I had a client I was working with, and it was a family system. Some of the family wanted me there. Some of the family did not. And I showed up because I felt this duty to show up. But every time I showed up, I felt this complete anxiety. The day before, I felt anxious about it. And I could feel it viscerally in my body. And it absolutely decreased the quality of my life because it was always haunting me in the background. And it was this sense that I think originally, when you start a business as an entrepreneur, you'll take what you get. And I had been, like, hey, you got a client you're going to work with? Hallelujah, I'll take it. So I had worked with them for a long time. And it was, probably 6, 7, 8 years in. And it was just causing me consistent angst. And I was back and forth. The hard thing is, right, you're getting paid. So you want to take care of your family. And there's a sense of duty because I've been working for them, but I didn't fire them. I kept working with them because I justified it and my own fear, but it was creating so much anxiety and dissatisfaction in my life. Finally, when the string was cut, it's amazing how the fear was keeping me in that same pattern of doing this thing that wasn't working for me. When finally,
how did we get to the string cut? Like where were you like, oh my God, this is terrible, this has to stop?
Yeah, it went on way too long. And finally, it was almost a mutual. There was a shift in leadership in the organization. So my deep alliance was no longer in the key decision maker position. It was somebody else. And it was like, oh, the decision's made. We're going to put this on hold. And it's funny that I didn't take the bull by the horns enough and allowed myself to suffer where I wasn't having the impact I wanted for way too long.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And now, somewhere in the future, you experience the benefits of leading yourself first, maybe with one of your clients, and it was the opposite experience of maybe being excited, feeling alive, and it was spilling over in the opposite way with your family and your energy. Do you have a moment like this?
Hallelujah, I do. As soon as that thing got cut, it's funny because I was filling my space with this thing. My mental, emotional, physical, psychological space was filled with this anxiety. And when I cut that, it was like this sense of relief. And then suddenly things started happening. I started attracting clients who were in a deeper alignment with what I had to offer, with who I was in the way that I worked, right? They weren't resistant against it. They were welcoming to it. And I'm over the moon with some of these clients. I have one client who, it was funny when I started working with him, and he's a very high level chief technology officer for one of the largest companies in the United States. But he was feeling this deep dissatisfaction and discontent because he was feeling invalidated in his system by a series of things that had happened. And we started working together, and he made the decision to leave that organization boldly without an exit plan, just leave and then find something. And oh my goodness, to see his level of confidence, to see him step into that executive presence, and what happened, he became a beacon. Stuff started coming to him, and he found himself in a beautiful fit for himself at a higher level in an organization where he feels validated and can bring his gifts. Now, that's one example. A second example, I worked with a president of a company recently for about a year, and he revolutionized his cognitive framework, right? He completely became aware of his old patterns, uprooted the ones that weren't working, and is building new pathways. And then I came into the organization and began working with his entire team. And it is phenomenal to see them having First of all, they're communicating more effectively. They're having fun showing up. There's not chaos, but there's consistency, and their profitability is just taking off. They're higher revenue, higher profitability, and they're creating an environment people want to be a part of. And it all goes back to recognize it doesn't start with somebody else. With everybody around the executive table, let's learn how to look in. Learn how to understand that you have a bias that's driving how you show up. And when you change that, you change the game, because you can't change other people. You can only change yourself.
Beautiful. Dr. Kevin, would you like to hear your story?
I would love to hear my story. I am so on board to hear my story.
We're going to put this on hold. I feel it like a punch in my stomach. This client I've been working with for 8 years, giving so much of myself. I can remember sharing so much of me, feeling anxiety at home, thinking about the things that I needed to do for this client, feeling my heart rate increase, driving to go visit them, feeling the split and the tension in the room as some people wanted me around and some people didn't. But I gave so much to these people. I had them for so long. They paid me well, and a client is a client, right? And I need to take care of my family. And I found myself time and time again facing this consistent angst, anxiety, dissatisfaction with my life. My kids could see it in me. They were a little bit afraid of me when I came home on the days being extra stressed out. I could see distance in my wife, and I was exhausted after all of this. I didn't want to have any fun. I didn't want to be outside. I didn't want to enjoy myself. And I'm ashamed to admit it, that I was really never able to see the pattern that was occurring for me from within me. It took them and a change of leadership to wake me up. And what I thought was a curse in losing this client opened up so much space for me. As soon as they were out of the picture, I realized how much of my space and my time and my energy was filled with this anxiety, and how much energy I was losing and could have been offering to so many more people who were ready for me, both clients, team members, and basically anybody I connected with. And as soon as I started letting go of that and letting go of these old patterns that were running my life without me knowing it, strange new things started happening. As I began leading with what I wanted, what I have always been doing by my life, things became easier. I started noticing my life being reflected in what I chose instead of fate. And I started seeing the truths that were unfolding in many other people's realities. And it allowed me to do my work better. And I started attracting clients that really were listening and engaged and energizing to me. I can remember the biggest impact seeing this one organization, this leader who found himself in the same patterns that I found myself in, doing what he was supposed to be doing, leading how he should be, and finally starting to revolutionize his framework of how he ran himself and his teams. As he started to make a change, he began to invite me in to work with many of his other team members. And I could see them go from slowly being exhausted, invalidated, and frustrated to starting to communicate, to have fun, to share ideas, to take more ownership. And it wasn't that they were just having a better time at their work. Things were getting better. Profit was skyrocketing. And it became an environment that people wanted to be a part of. And I can remember seeing these people connecting deeply and realizing how far of a journey I had come, that all of the many years and adventures and challenges that I faced in my life had led up to this moment. And it wasn't just about changing the life of an individual leader. This was impacting hundreds of people that worked for him and hundreds of thousands of more that were their family members, their brothers and sisters and friends. And I realized how important leading yourself first really was. And that's what I'm here to share with you today.
Well said. I like it. I like it.
Thank you, sir. You're a big speaker. Is that a part of the story in your books, or have you shared stories like this before from the stage?
I've shared stories, that's for sure, but that was artful. That was beautiful. It was visceral, and it was as authentic as anything I have shared. Absolutely. Yeah,
amazing.
Beautiful.
Well, thanks for playing full out with us today. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. And where can we go to learn more about you and your book? And do you have any closing thoughts for us today?
Oh, man, I love it to recognize that we are all writing our story. all the time, whether we know it or not. We are living in the story that we're writing, and there's a way to do it differently. And I love, thanks to your perspective, that you were able to shift around and help me see how to artfully present that in a way that's meaningful to people and truthful, genuine, authentic, but also deeply meaningful, to show them that there is a different way to do it. So I really, hats off, and I appreciate that so much. The book is upgradeyourleadership.com. Invite folks. March 5th is the big launch day celebration. So excited to do all the work to get the word out, and to help everyone upgrade their leadership. So go to upgradeyourleadership.com and find the path that has worked for me and so many leaders to become better.
Dr. Kevin Mays, thank you so much for joining us today on the Story Engine Podcast.
Thank you.